welcome to the Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy, the free podcast for motivated teachers and school leaders who want to inspire their students and school community in literacy learning. Make sure you subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast player, and for more amazing literacy resources, check out the show notes provided with every episode.
Hi, I'm Sharon and I'm the host of A Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy. In every Toolkit episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. Firstly, we acknowledge and pay our respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Kaurna people to country, and we respect and value their past, present and ongoing connection to the land and cultural beliefs. And welcome, Phil.
Thanks, Sharon, and welcome back to part 2 of our podcast. Enjoy. And for agency to happen, you also need a teacher to feel like they've got agency?
Yes. Yeah, and I mean, back to my thoughts at the beginning of our conversation, I really fear that we're in danger of teachers losing that sense that we're the ones who are designing the learning for our particular group of young learners that we're working with. When I first, did the outline of the book and started writing it, it was about halfway through the drafting and I emailed my editor and said, I need to put in an extra chapter and I can't believe I didn't think about it before, but the extra chapter needs to be about teacher agency.
Yeah.
And she agreed 100%. So, we put an extra chapter in because I think it's really important. And it's something, my work internationally is something that I'm hearing around the globe, not just in South Australia, which is really quite frightening. And I try not to just have like the rose-coloured glasses on, feel like I started teaching in the mid-80s. And sometimes you can look back with nostalgia and think, oh, the good old days. We had a lot of freedom to try new things. We had a lot of support to do that. We also were the ones who were, actually my first school, we didn't have a lot of resources. I made the resources I need and we created it together. But I try not to get too nostalgic about that. But there's something about that experience where I learnt to design the curriculum, design the learning for my particular group of children that I think helped me to really shift from that idea of I'm not teaching reading or I'm not teaching writing or I'm not teaching mathematics. I'm actually teaching mathematicians. They're just 5. I'm teaching readers, but they're 6.
And writers.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of ideas buzzing in my head. One is we talked to Misty Adnew and she said it's all bigger than what we're talking about. It's all about democracy within education. We live in one of the world's great democracies, and America does too, but within their education system, the teachers don't have a choice. So not every teacher, but there's state legislation saying you've got to teach a certain way or you can't do certain things. Yeah,
I see the same connection actually. And one of the values of a culture of agency, I think, is democratic values. Because if I'm invited into a classroom or a preschool and I see certain things and I get a bit of an idea that, I think the educators here value children's agency. And one of them is children accessing their own resources and initiating their learning. But another one is whether educators ask children for their say, whether educators are interested in what children's ideas are. And it actually goes back to Article 12 of the UN Conventions of the Rights of the Child, which says that children have a right to have a say about the things that impact them.
Yeah.
And so I think that's another aspect of, which is the voice part, I guess, of what agency means. If we have a sense of agency in our lives, then we will feel like our say can make a difference. Because if we feel like things can't change, then why would you even bother trying?
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, that's probably how some teachers are feeling at the moment.
Yeah. And I suppose even in our democracy, we feel like we can vote a government out. So we've got some sort of say there, but in the education system, we can't vote this thing out that we can see is not so good for children or whatever. Yeah. So, teacher agency is kind of vital, I think, for you to have that agency, trying to nurture that within the children. It's goes right down the line, doesn't it?
Completely.
Yeah.
Completely. And, agency for me is not only about higher learning outcomes. I believe we get more engaged learners. They're driven by an inner purpose, and we get a really amazing learning coming out of that. But it's also about well-being. And I don't think we have to go very far back. Just a couple of years ago, when we had a lot of those choices taken away for us during COVID, when we couldn't go overseas, we couldn't visit family, we couldn't sometimes go to the workplace. There were a lot of restrictions on us, and I think a lot of us felt a lack of agency, a sense of agency during those times. So sometimes it's kind of helpful to think about what's the opposite to help us define what it is.
Yeah.
And so thinking about, how many of us felt during COVID, where we felt disempowered, we felt a lack of agency in our own lives and control over our lives. It really impacts your well-being. And if you have that in an ongoing way, then it can really lead to a kind of sense of helplessness.
Yeah, that's right. So really, in the current situation in a school, leadership seems to be critical to keep this happening, or to encourage it to happen in the face of external things that are happening in the education system. It seems like we need leaders that can stand up to things. Do you think?
Yeah, I think so. It takes some courage.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I do work with some of those leaders.
Yeah.
I know it's possible, but it takes courage. It also, I think, takes a very clear idea about what your own values and beliefs are about learning and about teaching, about children, what you value. Because if you're really clear about those as a leader, you're not going to be swayed by the latest shiny bauble that comes along. I think that when you're not very clear about what you believe in terms of a learning philosophy or values, or what we would talk about in early childhood, a strong image of the child, then you can easily get seduced by the marketing of the latest thing that comes along.
Yeah. And in a previous podcast, we were talking about Garth Burma and about his initial work was to start writing going on in schools, because writing was a way of listening to the children's voice. Easily you can bring a phonics program into a school and say you all got to do that, but it's really hard to say, here's a writing program, because the children have actually got to write something, so it's got to come from them. So
yeah, and exactly, and I know you understand this as well, but we see so much purpose, agency, engagement, identity with that writing workshop approach, whether it's with writers' notebooks or with bookmaking, from our youngest 3-year-olds right through to adults, because that idea that a writer writes about things they know about and they care about, rather than being told. So it's really shifting away from that recipe formulaic way of writing.
Yeah.
I think it's highly sophisticated teaching. I think it's very intentional and explicit teaching. But we can do all of those things without taking away a child's sense of agency, of being in control.
Yeah.
And so an example for me that comes to mind is thinking, sitting in a writing workshop conference. I was talking with a group of teachers about this just last week, that when we're having a conference, I feel like we want to always start by listening, because we want to listen for what that writer's intentions are, whether they're 5-year-olds or 15-year-olds. What is it? What kind of book are they trying to make, or what are they writing, and who do they think their audience is going to be, and what's their purpose? Is it, some writers will have a very clear idea of where they want help with, and others may not have that. But if we listen first, and listening for what their intentions are, and I guess in the back of our head we've got the learning goals that we have in mind too, but then we try to help and teach in the conference something that's going to help that young writer get a little bit closer to what their intentions are and their goals, rather than just the teachers.
It was really interesting. Our last podcast with Mike Delena, we were talking about writing being the thing that actually changed the whole of South Australia, because it was the area where we could actually, if a leader's getting stuck for how they're going to change things, by bringing writing in, it's sort of saying you have to listen to the needs of the child, and you have to encourage what they want to write about themselves.
Yeah. That would definitely be my experience. And when a new school will start talking to us and say, well, we're not sure what we want to start with. We might want to start with word study or word inquiry. And I usually encourage them to actually start with creating a culture of writing and where kids have an identity as a writer, because then no matter whatever your approach to English orthography is, including phonics, whatever that approach is, you've got to have a place to practice that and to apply it and transfer it. And so if you haven't got a place of engaged writing, of purposeful writing, then it just remains a lesson that you go through the motions with. And that's like the opposite of agency, when you feel like you're just going through the motions and doing what the teacher's asked you to do. And I reflect back to some of the writing lessons that I've seen over the course of my 39 years of teaching, where the kids felt like they were writing for the teacher, not for whatever their purposes or their wider audience was. Their only audience was for the teacher.
Yeah. Do you think learning then can be blocked by teaching approaches?
Well, I think
slowed down.
Yeah, because this is, I think, one of the indicators for me whether a learner feels a sense of agency or not. Are they driven from an inner purpose from themselves, or are they doing something because it's a task that's been assigned to them?
Yeah.
And they're just kind of going through the motions. And I think it's pretty clear to see where we're going to get greater engagement, greater learning, where the children can surprise you when they have the opportunity to take it wherever they want to go. They usually surprise us, like they haven't been clipped.
Teachers out there in all different situations, they might be in a school where they've got someone like you or us or whatever, but they might be in an environment where the program is everything, and but maybe there are some little changes they can take, like getting kids writing might be a way that they can just start with this work.
Yeah, and I think I've been asked that a few times. Where can I start if I haven't got control over these things?
Yeah.
And I think the place to start is to think, what do I have influence or control over? Don't put all your energies into the thing that you can't change, because that will just deflate you.
And frustrate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there might be one little thing that you can make a change about, and it might be creating more opportunities for children to write about things that they care about.
Yep.
Or it might be starting the day in a certain way that starts to build that trust of each other. It might be even looking at the way you're setting up your learning environment, and instead of having assigned seating, the children choose where they learn best, whether it's on their tummy or standing up or whatever. So, I think it'll be different for everybody, but if you can find one little thing and just give it a go. And in the chapter about teacher agency, one of the strategies that I recommend is to, take a deep breath and approach your leadership and say something like, I've been doing some research, or I've been doing some professional reading about this, and I've been thinking this, and I want to try this. Could I give it a go? Would you be like my critical friend? Can I come back and talk to you about it?
I like that, yeah.
In a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And I think if we approach something from that very professional stance, show that you're not doing it to get out of something. You're not doing it to
be a rebel.
To be a rebel, exactly. You're doing this as a everyday researcher, and you're taking it seriously, and you want to involve them in them. I find it difficult to think many leaders would object to that.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things teachers struggle with is losing control. There's kind of like a scale of control, isn't there? There's a control freak down to the let them do whatever they like, or how do they think about that?
Well, I think first thing, the more controls we put around things, the harder it is to control it. That sounds like
true.
But, putting up lots of rules and regulations, you're going to end up being the police of those rules and regulations, not actually the educator who's supporting children to be learning. The more self-directed kids can be, I think the less they have to comply to all of these rules and regulations that you've created. And then the second thing would be that it's not laissez-faire, that as a community we need to respect each other and live together, and we need to figure those out. But instead of coming up with those regulations and rules or agreements and saying, this is what you need to do when it's reading time, you need to do that with the children. Come up and create those agreements together. Yep. And I think, having those conversations about, to grow as readers, this is what we need to do. To grow as mathematicians, these are the things that we need to do. Let's make a list of the things that are going to help us all to be able to do that. Some people like it to be quiet. Some people are okay with a little bit of talk, and just have those conversations. And again, when we hand it over to co-construct that, so we've still got a voice.
Yep.
I think that kids really surprise us all the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then developing those little routines that
Yes.
Routines with heart. What do you call them?
Rituals.
Rituals.
Yeah.
It's a better way to go, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Lisa, how do you balance fostering student agency with maintaining instructional goals and standards?
One thing I like to think of it as we plan with the child in the front of our mind and the curriculum in the back. So we have to know the curriculum.
That's good. I like that. Yeah.
If we know the curriculum, then we can get creative about it. But it doesn't mean that the curriculum's the first thing we're thinking of. It's the learners that we're with. It's the assessment information that we have about them.
Mm-hmm.
That is the place to start. But we've always got the curriculum in the back of our mind. And then the second thing is going back to that idea of doing more with children. So one of the things that in the last couple of years we've been advocating for in our coaching work in primary schools is, let's say, the example of writing workshop, because it's in my head. So we have a goal for the unit of study. We have 3 or 4 goals for that study. And then as part of the immersion phase, we would make those goals really transparent to the children so that they're aware of what the goals are. And then having conversations with them either in conferences or reflection times or even in mini lessons about, so what could we learn to help you to achieve these goals? And at the conference level, it's a very personal thing. I can see that you're really achieving this goal. Let's have a look at this next goal in our unit. What could we do to help you to achieve this goal? So involving them by helping them understand the curriculum too. Some of the teachers that I've had the honour to coach over the years, particularly in the middle upper primary years, they're pulling out the Australian curriculum and making that really transparent with the children and helping them to understand them so that the kids know, these are the things that we need to be accountable for.
Yep.
But how we achieve that is where we've got to say.
Yeah. I like that curriculum in the back of your mind and the kids at the front. And
because you need both.
But you need both.
Yeah.
And how they relate together to work. Yeah. So how do you support students who may initially struggle with taking ownership of their learning and exercising agency?
This sometimes happens when I am asked to go and teach in a site, and perhaps it's one of those classrooms that I've in the book call a compliant culture, where it's all about the teacher's rules and regulations. And how it looks is the children will say, can we use that pencil? Are we allowed to do this? Can I write about that? Can I read that book instead? They ask for permission all the time. So I know kind of exactly where you are there. So I think the book's really about creating a culture. And so as a teacher, if you're committed to creating that culture, then I think, let's say a new child comes into that culture of learning, they're going to learn from their peers more than us.
Yep.
So I think there's, looking at all of those components of building the learning culture is the big idea, I guess. And then any child who might come into that is going to be acclimatised in it and they'll learn from their peers. But if you're starting
in a culture where it's all being controlled, all about control.
It's a whole. Then I think you need to start small and be kind to yourself, and start small by thinking about what can I do with the children rather than to them, and also trust is a huge thing. So perhaps it's those rituals of belonging and identity too that build trust, because if they're a group of learners who are used to being controlled and following directions only, I think have to learn to trust that both the educator and the environment is going to support them to have their own ideas instead of just follow instructions.
Yep.
So let's say tomorrow I've decided to take a contract and I have this beautiful class of year 4s, but the culture of learning that they've been used to is very compliant. I think where I would start would be relationships and building trust.
Yeah. One thing I've found over the years, or a ritual I suppose, is to get wonderful read alouds going on.
Oh, yeah.
And that kind of really develops that relationship, doesn't it, somehow?
And it opens up opportunity to have conversation about relationships, about, values.
Yeah.
Because if you choose the right books that might open up conversation about friendships or about conflict or about all sorts of things. Right?
Yeah, because you've got this story over here that you're all involved in. Yeah, it just gives you all a common interest, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, I love that, Phil. And I think that I would name that as a ritual, that read aloud ritual for sure.
When I've definitely started in first term with a class, I'd do a lot of that just because I knew it was a relationship building thing.
Yeah. And especially if it's not just, I'm just going to pick up any book and read it, that you've chosen the
intentionally,
book, whether it's a novel or whether it's a series of picture books around some common values or ideas. And then you give opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah.
And this is where the language can come in, I think, too. That, you know, if we want to have a conversation around some big ideas in a book, helping everybody understand that whatever they have to share is okay and it's not about the right answer. So even changing your language to include, well, what do you think about this? Invites opinion, invites perspectives, and they're all right, rather than asking questions that are about just recalling the facts from the book or something.
Yeah. And I found with older kids having an ongoing chapter book that you're reading with them. So every day we're on the same book and we've got the same characters, but we're continuing that week after week, and they're just immersed in this world with you, which is great. And
then there's all those other benefits to learning as well when you're reading aloud, vocabulary building, you know, all sorts of things.
Everything. And the other thing I found was when you read a child's writing and they're with you, then you're automatically showing that you really are valuing their thoughts, their feelings.
Yeah.
If they're reading out to the class, they just love, not everyone wants to read out to the class, but it develops the sharing, I suppose, isn't it? That develops that relationship with each other and with you, with the kids. And
because if you're able to write about things that you care about or you know about, you're sharing a bit of yourself.
Yeah. What was one of the toughest things about writing the book? Sleepless nights.
Well, actually, it's an interesting tough thing because COVID was the gift of time for me.
Oh, okay.
Because as that came around and I was kind of locked out of schools, it gave me the time to do the drafting, which I would have had to be doing at nights or on weekends otherwise. But the challenge then was that I couldn't get into schools to do the research I wanted to. You know, I had imagined just being the fly on the wall in classrooms a whole lot more. So I had to rely on my past experience and pulling up videos and pulling up photographs that I'd taken over the years, and these amazing teachers where I would email and say, I'm talking about this. Have you got a story about this? And then they would send me some thoughts as well. So the biggest challenge for me was that I didn't get to be in the classrooms as much as I'd hoped.
Yeah. And any feedback, incidental comments or whatever, or that have helped or not yet? Or
no, I've been actually really humbled by the response that from all very varied places, not only in Australia. I mean, it's published by an American publisher, but it's being picked up by quite a few international schools who are doing book clubs with it. Right. Just on Saturday, I got a beautiful email from Alma Flint, so a professor at a university who's wanting to use part of it in a course. So I'm getting this, it's very humbling, the feedback actually. And I think the thing that a lot of people are saying to me is that they're finding it an easy read, and I take that as the best compliment because I worked really hard to make it an easy read and very accessible. My first editor said something to me that stuck with me. She said, I want you just to imagine you're sitting having a cup of coffee with your friend and you're talking about it like you and I are doing now, Phil.
Right.
And I tried to have that kind of a voice in it so that it's not a highly academic, dense text, in the hope that that means more people will read it.
And talking about accessibility, how do we get the book?
It's available in Australia through Paddy Mellon Press. And also on Amazon. But if you're in Australia, I'd really encourage you to support the small booksellers in Paddy Mellon Press. Oh, and I should actually add there, the other thing that I'm getting a lot of feedback about is there are QR codes that lead to little videos that you can have a look at it.
Oh,
and I'm very, very proud that they're South Australian preschools and schools that are featuring there just to bring some of the ideas to life.
Okay, what's the next book?
I'm back to that old, I don't know because there's too many ideas problem.
It's going to come to you one day and you'll go, bing.
Probably.
Right.
Yeah. No, I don't have anything set yet.
I think student agency is a big one because it affects everything, doesn't it? It's like it's all about your pedagogy. It's about how you're going to interpret the curriculum.
Well-being.
Everything. But something that could be in a bit of danger if we don't do something about it.
Yeah. And as I said too at the workshop on Saturday morning, that sometimes we can think about learner agency when in early childhood we're thinking about play or we're thinking about inquiry. But I feel really strongly that we need to, at the moment, advocate very strongly for learner agency in literacy and numeracy as well.
Yep. How do we convince governments and the media to do that?
If I knew that, I'd probably be a rich woman.
Yes, that's right. It's difficult, isn't it? Because people in authority sometimes, one of the things I've learnt through podcasting is that in those early days we had a lot more educators at higher levels in the department where they understood what teachers' needs were, whereas we get these layers of people that don't have that.
Are removed from
that.
Maybe either never were in the classroom or haven't been there for a long time. Yeah. I think, to be honest, if I spent a lot of time thinking about how I could change systems I'd probably be very depressed. So,
but what you're trying to do is change things from the ground up.
Exactly. Yeah. And I was going to say, as a preschool or a primary or secondary teacher, you can only start with your class.
Yeah.
And I know that children will be the best thing that sell it. Once the families see how engaged their kids are and excited about their learning and purposeful, once the leaders see, what's going on there? There's, not so many kids coming down to see me for behaviour or...
someone said to me the best newspaper you can get into is writing your own class newsletter because you've got a ready-made audience and you're telling them what the kids are all doing.
And get the children involved in writing it with you.
Yeah.
And there you go.
It's not you writing the class newsletter. Yeah, there's a bit of agency.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Thank you, Lisa, for all the insights today, and it's been wonderful to learn about teacher but mostly student agency, but it's both really, isn't it, together?
Yeah, it is.
Yep.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Phil.
Thank you so much. Okay, bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. To make sure you don't miss any literacy learning tips and insights, please subscribe to our show on your favourite podcast player. At Q Learning, our literacy specialists draw on over 30 years of teaching and international consulting experience to deliver world-class learning solutions. We equip, empower and support teachers to become their authentic selves. To find out about upcoming webinars and about how Q can help you and your school, visit qlearning.com.au. And you can get even more amazing teaching resources right now at teachific.com.au. Stay tuned.